Ci siamo, a tutte, a tutti.
Welcome to everybody. Welcome to Sana Slow Fair, the first edition of a conference dedicated to slow wine. Thank you. In these last few days, since I was asked to moderate this plenary session, I thought a great deal about how to start it, how to welcome you, and how to explain the project over the last 2 years, how to sum up everything, all the energy that we have in this room today. In fact, it was an energy that we started out with. And when I thought about what to speak and how to speak about this, I thought of a Chinese proverb that says, when the winds of change blow, some people build walls, other people build windmills. And that's the spirit that characterized the last few years with the pandemic, and slow food, however, did not stop. We continued to work despite the difficulties. We developed the manifesto for good, clean, and fair wine, and an international network of people were developed to bring together people who believe in this manifesto. This conference organized by us and by BolognaFiere with the help of Slow Food. This Congress today is in fact going to talk about what is clean and fair wine. And this is something which in fact was rather crazy, and it is, but what slow wine is not so much a congress on wine, but on good, clean, and fair wine. And we were rather crazy in developing this, and I think we were, all the people in the last couple of years who followed us had to have a certain amount of madness as well. We're talking about 242 wineries and 18 countries, as well as Italy, that in fact are present here and have gone along with us. This is an event which is very important because we have master classes which go from Bourgogne to China and wineries in China. I know that we had to get you up at dawn today because, of course, today was the change into summertime. But this is really an important beginning. The guests will be very many and the speakers will be very many, so I think we should start. I'd like to start here we're at BolognaFiere, and this is a collaboration that we have developed over the last 2 years. In October 2020, we presented the manifesto for good, clean, and fair wine. And so we're rather at home now in Bologna at BolognaFiere. And it's a very welcoming home because BolognaFiere has 30 years experience in organic farming, especially thanks to the Sana Fair. So I'd like to call upon the President of BolognaFiere, Giampiero Calzolari. Well, good morning, everybody. And again, we had to get up pretty early this morning, as was said, starting at 9 o'clock when we, the very day we go to summertime, means that you really are very used to getting up because you're part of the agricultural world, but also it indicates your great love of this particular sector. We're particularly happy to have you here today, because when a new initiative, in fact, comes about, we're always very happy. In the last couple of years, like many, we have suffered and we have had many problems. We organized meetings, of course, and that was the most forbidden thing in the last 2 years. But again, of course, there were good reasons for banning assemblies and meetings, and we fully understand this. But in the last few months, we really felt the need to start again. and to meet in person and to develop events. The fair is not only a business meeting, of course that's very important, but it's a great moment of coming together, of being able to exchange views at first hand. And when you go to a fair, you go back into your companies or your facilities, not only with business contracts, but geared up and given a spur by what you've heard, what you've exchanged in the 2, 3, 4 days where you meet so many people at the fair. And this is a fantastic opportunity. It's a new initiative. And we have seen the number of events grow in the BolognaFiere area, and especially extending the events into the city. And we see that even more events are coming to Bologna because we do have this very well-organized facility, and the city of Bologna itself is able to welcome all the people who come. So I'd like to thank the hoteliers and restaurateurs who lived and with great trepidation through the months previous to this meeting and previous to other meetings, and wanting to start again. So this is a new adventure, as a rather crazy adventure, as was said before, but we're sure that what we can give to slow wine, thanks to our experience with Sana and also with slow food, we're sure that this will become a really important event in Bologna. And today, talking about agricultural practices, talking about sustainability, of course, very topical subjects. And we, despite the pandemic and despite the difficulties that we're still living through, we mustn't forget how important it is to manage our environment and to try and improve the environment that we have. Sana, from this point of view, was all important, and it's always been important. And so this great marriage that we are celebrating today will allow us to build in the future, I'm sure, a very important annual meeting at an international level as well on wine. And therefore, thank you, and thank you on behalf of all the people who have worked on this fair. Thank you from BolognaFiere and the organizers, and welcome. I am sure that this will be an opportunity for you to meet and exchange views, and that this will become a very important event, and will also take us a step forward and a step further to trying to protect and improve the environment and repair the damage that we have done. So thank you all, and I wish you every success in your work. Thank you, Giampiero Calzolari, President of BolognaFiere. Now I'd like to leave the floor to the Counsilor with special responsibilities for the budget, Mr. Salvano, of the Emilia-Romagna authorities. Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure for me to speak on behalf of Emilia-Romagna, to be able to speak here in presence, because trade shows for this region and for this city are very important fundamental events. The Bologna Trade Fair is a player in the development of Emilia-Romagna. Let me say this in public, because it's around the Bologna Fair, trade fairs, that we not only have meetings, but also there's an enormous number of opportunities in allied sectors. The fair that we're inaugurating today has started with several online conferences, in fact, is a fair that confirms the fact that this trade show of Bologna is a place where innovation is at home. We have gone digitalized, and also in a sector like this, BolognaFiere has been able to identify new ways of producing in a different way and producing new products. We have had more than 100 days of drought in our country now, and that tells us one thing. It shows how really important the climate issue is. It's not a problem for tomorrow. It's not a problem of yesterday, indeed. It's a problem that we have to look at now. The question of sustainability, which is all important and which pervades this whole fair, is a challenge of incredible importance, because we're facing changes in habits of the 21st century, because we got used to certain things and it will be difficult to set them aside. And also there's a trade-off between environment and work. Sometimes more work, in fact, implies less attention to the environment. But we have to develop a positive trade-off, and we're trying to do this in Emilia, Romagna, doing it together with the cities and with other stakeholders in local development to develop a pact between work and the environment to allow work and jobs to grow, but at the same time protect our environment. And when we talk about food, there's another trade-off. You say, oh, I want to have a product which is more sustainable and so on, but is it just as good, we ask ourselves. And then there's the other question. And of course, investing in organic practices, of course, costs money, and therefore, what's the trade-off there? This is organic farming produces a good quality product, and that's something we have to get across to everybody. And then there's the trade-off between sustainable production and also value for money. But here we have to look at the wider scene, the regional, national, but also international scene. And we have to have the intervention of the public sector, because if we want to make a quantum jump, it will cost more. But that's the role of the regions, the national and international sector. We have used the funds of the last budget. 400 million are now being set aside for the budget of these years that go into the future, because this is something that we have to continue to support, especially in this extraordinary moment when we have had COVID, and we still have COVID, the war, and now drought. And we have to ensure that the resources we make available be exploited to the best. So our procedures, our new procedures and practices, and don't just mean added investments. We have to ensure that, in fact, it brings about a real change in how we live. We mustn't waste money to use ordinary things. We must use this money to use extraordinary things, something which we wouldn't have been able to do had we not had available these new investment resources. And therefore, I think that it's all important that we look at the question of what is fair, not only fair in wine, but fair across the board, fair for people who work in this sector. This is something which is being looked at this fair, and which is at the heart of that pact for jobs and the climate and the environment that we have put together. It includes everybody, because people and jobs are central in the life of Emilia-Romagna. And with this, I'd like to wish this trade show every success. Thank you.
Grazie alla
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to thank Mr. Paolo Calvano, representing the regional government of Emilia-Romagna. And he has really touched upon all the main topics we're going to take up today. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Daniele Ara, Agriculture Officer for the Bologna Local Authority. And I think you are one of the first municipal councillor with a special proxy for agriculture. Yes, the Council of Bologna, the municipality of Bologna, has a special office for agriculture. So that's a privilege, and I think that's a fact in its own right, looking at the future. We are very happy about the fact that trade fairs have resumed, and you see that, you can feel it, you feel the enthusiasm with which we are going back to in-presence trade fairs. We need to be optimistic, although we are all experiencing great difficulties. Bologna is a very important trade fair hub, and this trade fair is very important because, as you know, we find ourselves, we are in a region where agriculture is very important, where food and wine are written in capital letters, and most of the times we tend to forget about our rural and farming origins, if you wish. So this trade fair for us, it's a turning point in terms of a future food policy, and we would like to have the slow wine fair, we'd like to have FederBio, and we'd like to have food and wine at the center of this policy, being food and wine very important for us in this region. We are currently experiencing a very difficult and dire situation. Drought on the one hand, the Ukrainian war, and of course the post-COVID-19 pandemic situation. But we should never look back. We should, of course, fully embrace the green transition process that the European Union has embraced. Farm to fork, this new special relationship between producers and consumers. We should not allow the current situation to put an end to this process, to this transition process. We should build a fair relationship between consumers and producers. This is of pivotal importance. Consumers have to acknowledge the value behind the work of farmers, has to understand how valuable that work is, and has to pay a fair price for agricultural products. Then another important message that I would like to put across today is that we are now leading a network that is called the Spreco Zero, so zero waste, as part of a national initiative. So we're leading this initiative as a local community because we do believe that zeroing waste is of paramount importance looking forward. I would like to thank Slow Food, Oscom and FederBio for organising today's meeting and today's trade fair. Trade fairs like ours have a very important role to play. They are educational fairs, if you wish. They provide food for thought for the local community. I teach at high school, at a local high school, and I see how terribly terribly suffering they are right now. So adolescents are drinking poor quality wine, poor quality alcoholics. So I think we really have to preach this lesson. So we have to educate young adolescents, and they have to be educated to drink good quality wine. They have to taste the wine. They have to appreciate the taste of wine. Thank you very much, and I'll stop here and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you. Thank you very much, Daniele Ara, Agriculture Officer of the Bologna Local Authority. Well, we do really hope that we will have many young adults with us. Stefano Patronelli should have taken the floor right now. He's excusing himself. He was otherwise engaged, but he has sent us a speech which I'm going to read out. So the minister excuses himself for not being present today and thanks BolognaFiere and Slow Food for the invitation. As you know, we are currently in a very difficult situation for the food and wine sector in Italy and abroad, and the winemaking sector makes no exception. The energy crisis that is now been exacerbated by the Ukrainian war has created new challenges as regards the food and wine sector, and governments have to step in order to curtail the surge in prices for raw materials. Our manufacturing systems and productive systems are being now put under pressure. We have again to pool our energies in order to make the most of the energy that is available. Now more than ever we needed to stay united as a country, as a European Union, and as a community, and as a country overall. So we have to take up the challenges that lie ahead by standing united. The wine producing sector is a good example of integration throughout the network, and this is something we need to prop up and support for the future. The idea of community goes hand in hand with the concept and the idea of vertical industrial segment. So we need to make sure that revenues for the food and wine sector are less and less volatile and become more and more stable. So we have to support well-integrated systems, multifunctional networks, the winemaking system being one good example in this regard. So we need to make sure that the winemaking sector becomes an asset for the entire food and wine and agricultural sector. So we would like to make sure that new generations do appreciate that and start appreciating the good quality of wine. The winemaking sector is not only able to generate income, but is also able to play a pivotal role in terms of training, in terms of qualifications, and in terms of defending our local specialties in the field food and wine, and they also protect ourselves for climate change. So it could be considered as a thrusting force to support our local community, our local culture and traditions that play a role across the board in Italy and worldwide. This is the reason why we have signed a manifesto for good, healthy and fair wine. We'd like to defend sustainability, we'd like to prop up the social role of wine making companies and wineries at large. Wine is not just an agricultural product, it also has more to it. It is an eyewitness, so to speak, of the local cultures of our territories, and it helps us to prop up the value of our local areas, and by propping up the winemaking sector and preserving and safeguarding its values is one of our top priorities in order to make sure that we fully comply with the common agricultural policies and with the national resilience plan. The recent rules that have been approved as it regards high added value practices and the entire winemaking sector aims at that, so to create new dynamism for this sector. We have to stay focused on training activities in order to transfer knowledge. This is one of the main goals of our activities. We would like to make sure that wine is being drunk in a very conscious way, and I will now conclude my speech by pointing out that we would like to enter into an open dialogue with other institutions in order to identify the best solutions at local level and in order to come up with a plan for a common future. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best for this conference. Minister Stefano Patuanelli. So I'll stop here, and I will stay here at the podium, which is quite comfortable. Joking, of course. I will now like to give the floor to our next speaker. Maybe just by way of introduction, I could just point out that cooperation is a word we have heard a lot of the last, we've been hearing a lot of the last few days. So when you set out to write a manifesto, as we did for slow fare wine, there's no room for selfishness. There is no room for monologues, so to speak. You want to do things together. That's the spirit behind a trade fair like ours. And this is the reason why we have some very old friends here today. FederBio being one of our oldest friends. This is an association that was set up several years ago with the goal of supporting all the companies operating in the organic sector. 110%, that's the increase of the production of organic wine in Italy. 19% of all of the winemaking areas are linked to organic farming, and this is one of the highest rate in Europe, so that's very significant. Grazia Mammuccini, President of FederBio, is here with us today. She is a very old friend of slow wine, and she's also a winemaker in Tuscany, Vigna Ronderop. That's one of her initiatives, and she has been closely following the idea of the manifesto since its very beginning. Well, first of all, thank you. I'd like to thank you. I'd like to thank you, BolognaFiere, for this new initiative and for this new cooperation scheme with FederBio. FederBio and BolognaFiere have been closely cooperating since the very beginning, since we had the first edition of Sana. And over the last few years, we have also been organizing the Rivoluzione Bio and the Stati Generali del Biologico. So two schemes, two initiatives which were inaugurated in order to celebrate the passing of the law on organic farming. We've been waiting for that for 15 years, basically, and the law that was passed on March the 2nd was then published on the Italian Gazette last week. So after so many years, at last, we now have a law on organic farming. And as you know, Italy ranks among the most important countries worldwide in terms of organic farming. Then my thanks also go to Slow Food, because this means for us resuming a cooperation that has always been in place on a personal level, and the manifesto on good, healthy and fair wine is something that unites us. So this cooperation scheme that was signed with BolognaFiere in the year 2020, after the fierce outbreak of the pandemics, allowed us to organize an in-presence Sana trade fair and also Terra Madre. So this alliance, if you wish, was of strategic importance for us to have the final approval of the law. So without the help of some very important associations, it would never been possible to have this Italian law being passed. So we've been working very hard in order to get to this point and today we are here for the first joint initiative, and FederBio is also a partner to this initiative. We would like to support this cooperation, as I said, because I really believe that good, healthy and fair wine is strictly intertwined with organic wine. Organic is not the only feature, of course, but I think that there are many common aspects, and we would really like to support all the wineries that operate in this market segment. We thought that this first edition of our trade fair would come at a point in time that we judge to be very positive and optimistic, but we are now experiencing one crisis after the other, and most probably all these crises have common roots, and they have a very strong impact on our daily lives and on the operations of companies or our wineries. Wine producers are experiencing great difficulties. Costs are just going through the roof. I'm thinking about raw materials, I'm talking about transportation costs. Everything is running out of control. Markets are experiencing a strong turmoil. And again, companies are experiencing great difficulties. We thought we were at a turning point. We thought we were just about to complete this ecological transition. And now it seems that there are so many other emergencies that we can no longer think of the ecological transition. But we see that there are two main critical issues here: energy on one hand and food on the other hand. And this is creating a whole system of speculations which are aiming at slowing down the ecological transition. That's absolutely wrong, because agriculture, the farming sector, they must be the first element that we help us to get out of these emergency situations. There's a specific pressure to produce more, to produce more food. Our country is not specifically impacted by what is happening right now in Ukraine. The main issue for us right now, in terms of agriculture issues, is drought. So we really have to accelerate in terms of ecological transition. So good, healthy, and fair wine is of paramount importance in this regard. Wine was able to give us some boost, so to speak, in terms of technological innovation. It has allowed us to turn a corner, to make full use of our local territory, and to generate value for the entire agricultural sector. So we made the best out of our local resources because of the traditions and the knowledge we derived from the winemaking sector. So that's important. We signed the manifesto in our capacity as FederBio representatives. We did so last year when we convened the Sana Trade Fair. And again, this manifesto is about good, healthy and fair wine. As a wine that pays tribute to the local territory, every winemaker is different, and this difference, this variety it has to be interpreted as a mirror of the local community and local territory. And then we wanted to protect the environment, biodiversity, the fertility of the soil, and we would like to do everything in our power in order to protect ourselves against climate change. So these are the main pillars of biodynamic and organic wine. We have just heard that we are one of the countries with the highest percentage in terms of production of organic wine. Over the last 3 years, we have experienced a 60% increase in the consumption of organic wine. But organic, in general, organic farming is very important for Italy at large. 60% of the wineries that are present here today are certified wineries as organic producers. So we have to support that. We wanted to support winemakers in their commercial strategies. And all this rests on very important values: defense of the local territory, ethical production, and it means preserving a fair working environment, a fair society. So these are the values behind organic farming. So I do really think that we are part and parcel of this community, of the winemaking community, in order to support the ecological transition. As I said, wine can play a pivotal role. And now, more than ever, it is very important to clinch partnerships, to build alliances. And funnily enough, we are seeing a lot of conflicts arising, but this is not our priority. Our cooperation with Slow Food, with BolognaFiere, is just extremely important. It is important for us to be part of this slow wine fair community because, as I said, this trade fair has to play a very important role within the ecological transition. Our organic winemakers are part of this community, and FederBio can only be a partner to this initiative. Thank you very much.
Grazie alla Presidentessa.
Thank you, Maria Grazia Mammuccini, who is the President of FederBio. Now I'd like to continue, again talking about the collaboration that I mentioned before, to talk about a winning partnership which started in 2014, Fisa, the Sommelier, Hoteliers and Restaurateur Association. They have adopted this slow wine guide, and they have, in fact, entered the field, as it were, with sommelier, visiting our wineries and tasting wines every year since 2015. This is a partnership that has grown. There are 80 Fisa workers, co-workers, who write about this. I'd like to welcome Luigi Terzago, who is the president of Fisar. Good morning, everybody. It's with great pleasure that today I stand here before you. This allows me to repeat and reiterate our collaboration with Slow Food, which has now been up and running for several years and has become increasingly consolidated. This partnership between these two associations is quite solid now. Now, we have worked close to the organizers of Slow Food with their meetings over the last couple of years, and we have been able to get to know each other. And in the last couple of years, we also discovered the fact that, in fact, there were many points we had in common. If we look at this winemaking and grape growing world from different points of view, even if that's the case, we realize that the image that we had of this sector, in fact, goes in the same direction. First of all, with the slow wine guide, this is obvious. For some 8 years now, our sommeliers have been working hand in hand with this slow wine guide. And in fact, 2 years ago, I was here at the presentation of the Good, Clean and Fair Wine Manifesto. And we didn't realize, but we really had the same things in mind. And Giancarlo can support this. We had the same mindset with regard to environmental protection and so on. Even if, as I say, we come from different sides of the issue, but we have a commonality of view. And in this crisis, which usually means that people tend to isolate, I'm convinced that they will be able to save themselves by hunkering down and just thinking about themselves. But despite that mentality, in these years of problems, we have been able to work together and not isolate ourselves. And we have also in common the whole question of slow, in the sense of the respect for the humanitarian values for people, and respect for people, respect for the land. And these are the values that we have to be the basis of our future work. There are many, many different aspects of our sector which make it so very great. I'd like to thank you, therefore, for having allowed me to take the floor, and on the behalf of the whole of Fisa, the association, I'd like to wish this trade fair all the best and good, clean and fair wine. Thank you, the President of the Association Fisa. Now, I think it's fairly clear now to all of you the collegial aspect that binds this trade show and all the people who are involved. And the things that are coming to the fore, especially, is our link with Milano Wine Week. Just before we started this plenary session, I had a few words with the President, and he talked about a new project that is in the offing, and he'll be talking to you about that.
Sta lavorando perché Federico,
because Federico Gordini, the president of the Milan Wine Week, is full of energy, and he's got lots of things that are on the boil. And I think that the event, in fact, reflects his enormous energy. And Federico, I know that you don't like it to be called a fair, but you see that the Milan Wine Week is a long week, 9 days, where Milan becomes the center of wine meetings with wine producers and other allied sectors.
è imprescindibile.
And also you link in from a digital point of view, which has become so important. So I'd like to call upon Federico Gordini, who is president of the Milan Wine Week. Thank you, Federica. It's a great pleasure for us to be here from the last trade show in Italy through to this new event, which I think will indicate a new start for this sector of ours, the wine sector. We not only have a friendship with slow wine, but also we have common values. We share these values very strongly, and this has led us to develop a series of activities together, which led to the Slow Wine Manifesto presented at the Milan Wine Week. But also we have extended these joint activities to BolognaFiere. We had a very good meeting. We saw how much we share our values and how we should extend this beyond our borders, because we think it's very important, especially at this particular time, which is so full of difficulties with so many problematic divisions which abound, I think it's important that we, in the world of wine and communication, have to come together and come together to be able to help our sector and transform any opportunity of visibility and communication, be it a trade fair or event. We have to be able to make these events something really concrete to develop practical results for operators, and which will have an effect on the final customer, which is often somebody who is tend to be sidelined. This involvement of all the stakeholders together with the consumers is something which we have to underline. The consumers are part and parcel of our sector, and I think this is what is going to happen in these 3 days in Bologna. We work a great deal on developing the awareness of the consumers. We had a criteria which is being expanded by having many allied events and master classes. This was something that in fact started with the furniture salon, of having lots of satellite events, which we have taken up definitely, and this is what we're doing with our Milan Wine Week, so that we can take our stakeholders into different areas and spread our wings much more widely. And this, in fact, in 4 years has allowed us to become a very important event. And we're here today to underline this common vision that we have, but also to extend a message of unity. After what has been seen in the world of wine and events, these overlapping meeting, which in fact was very important, and which at the end of the day I think have a negative effect on wine producers. But I think that the close collaboration between Milan and Bologna, I think, is a way of giving a sign to everybody, a sign of an Italy that really can work together with its operators and create a system. Thank you very much, Federico Gordini, for President of Milan Wine Week. Now, not many of you know that slow food, in fact, was born out of wine. Carlo Petrini, in fact, founded the Friends of the Barolo. So slow food got off the ground thanks to wine. And in fact, you can talk about everything before a good bottle of good wine. The best ideas come out in this events or on occasions like this. And in fact, the slow wine guide and manifesto is just one of these. But what we wanted to do from the slow food point of view is go back to wine and underline how what we're talking about is wine which is good, clean, and fair. And that's not necessarily very easy. It's not easy to develop events which also economically are valid. But this is not the attitude we have taken on the part of slow food. We have Varazi, who is Vice President of Slow Food Italy. Good morning, everybody. I'm sorry if I apologize if I don't take off my mask. Today, in fact, it's very important. This day, if you like, started quite some time ago, and it was a decision to develop this slow wine manifesto, which allowed wine, if you like, to leap out of its glass and spread its wings further. This is a very important day, as I say, because here in Bologna, where Sana was the was the event where we first of all announced this slow wine, and when we developed this alliance between various operators and producers, and by producing wine in a certain way, coalesces principles that we all share. Principles of understanding, not of skill, but also of responsibility. And as was just said, would be the basis for future agricultural policy. So we want to bring together all our producers in a large community. We were able to select, thanks to our manifesto, more than 500 producers, and that wasn't easy, especially given the difficulties of the last few years, and also because of our economic difficulties. The producers are linked by the three themes of our manifesto: good, clean, and fair wine, which means environmental protection and social fairness. These are themes that will be gone into even further today, and this places us at the center of challenges that we have to face, not tomorrow, but challenges we have to face today. The war is terrible, but it's not so much the bombs that we are seeing, but especially we have another war of the climate change. And indeed, this climate change is responsible for the drought that we're now suffering and which causes so many difficulties. We've seen a drought that we've never had in the last 35 years. We've had the warmest winter in the last 60 years. These are dramatic facts that we have to face. The Slow Wine Fair has an offspring, if you like, of our manifesto, that you can develop agricultural policies and practices which don't use much water, that don't use chemical substances, that the producer also is the custodian of our environment. This is the job that we want to further and widen as much as possible our international coalition, which is strategic, also strategic for consumers, people that actually drink the wine that is made. And this is something that we must further, especially in difficult times like this, because there is speculation ongoing which shows an easy way out. And I think, and I repeat what the President of FederBio says, we have to really even work harder in the face of these difficulties, and everybody has to do their bit. We'd also like to underline the attention of our association not only for producers but for young people, and there are many young producers who have signed this manifesto. And we have a National Assembly which is now ongoing to look at the solidarity among producers. And Monday we're going to have this alliance. More than 100 chefs of the Italian network will be meeting here to develop a strategy for the future after 2 years of enormous difficulty, of course, for them. Therefore, we would like to here reiterate our commitment where we will stand beside them, especially in our endeavor for good, clean, fair wine, because good cuisine needs good agriculture, good agricultural practices, and good wine. After the first difficult contacts that we had with our Ukraine community, we were able to make contact with Julia Pidenko, who is our leader in Kiev. And given the dramatic situation that she talked about in person, we have developed donations for refugees, people that are leaving the country, but especially all those who want to remain behind defend their country, their farms and their animals. And that's a really difficult, terrible situation. There is no possibility for them to buy feedstuffs or to be able to get fuel for machines and cars. We're going to launch a film video by Carlo Petrini, who is the president of the Farming Association in Ukraine, and he is launching a really heartfelt appeal to us. So before I say goodbye and show this video, I'd like to thank all magnificent staff of Slow Food that yet again have succeeded in doing the impossible. I'd like to thank BolognaFiere for having trusted in us and gone along with our project. And also I'd like to thank all our partners, Ascom Bologna, FederBio, and the ministry and the Emilia, Romagna authorities for having done their bit towards the organization. Thank you. And now we're going to hear the video.
У нас семейная ферма виноградная. Мы занимаемся органическим.
We as a family have been producing organic wine for several generations. We produce 10 different types of organically certified wine. A few years ago, we were awarded a golden medal at the Düsseldorf trade fair. The situation in Ukraine is currently very difficult. The enemy has attacked Ukraine, and we were not expecting this enemy to attack our country, so we all feel a bit lost. In my capacity as president of the Association of Small Winemakers, I'm extremely worried, and I fear that the soldiers of the enemy may destroy all the farms and all the wineries. In Krakow, close to Kherson, they have plundered and destroyed everything. Now we are experiencing difficulties, and the problem is that we can't really see our families. So if possible, I would like to ask you to help us and to buy the wines of small winemakers in our country. Everybody is trying to help each other under the current circumstances in Ukraine. So mutual help is what we are supporting, and initiatives like Slow Food in Ukraine are just one way of helping our winemakers. So I kindly ask you to support such initiative as much as possible, so that we as winemakers in Ukraine can survive. Thank you.
Non è facilissimo.
So it's not easy now to go back to our conference after watching this video, given, again, all the feelings that we are experiencing every day, that we've been experiencing every day for weeks now. So let us try and go back to the main topic for today, which is good, clean and fair wine. The winemakers taking part in Slow Wine Fair are winemakers that are in line with the values and principles that are set out in the Manifesto for Good, Clean and Fair Wine. This is a 10-rule manifesto that was written with the help of experts of this field. Our manifesto comes and derives from the idea from the inside that wine can be considered as a thrusting force for a new approach to agriculture. a friend of mine comes from Südtirol. He is a winemaker, and I recall that he once said that you can have auctions for wines, but you don't have auctions for potatoes or for carrots. So this is just to explain that wine can, as I said, be a driver for a new change, for a new approach. The three main pillars of the manifesto are wine, to be understood as environmental sustainable product, so wine is necessary for ecological transition, wine as a thrusting force for biodiversity and safeguard of the landscape, and wine as a pivotal element of our local communities. This is something we tend not to talk too much about. So these are the three main pillars, as I said, of the Manifesto for Good, Clean and Fair Wine. And these are also the three topics that were at the center of a series of 3 webinars that were organized in the run-up in the week before this trade fair. So I would now like to give the floor to Giancarlo Gariglio, who's coordinator of the Slow Wine Coalition, and he will tell us more about these 3 different online conferences organized in the run-up to our fair today. Thank you very much, Federico, and I would like to thank you all for being here today. We're here. And we're all set, so we can officially kick off Slow Wine Fair proceedings. And I'd like to thank all those who have already taken the floor today before me. And Don Luigi Ciotti and Carlo Petrini will be with us in a minute on our podium. And thank you wholeheartedly for being with us today. My task today is just to summarize basically some of the ideas that have arisen throughout this 3 web conferences. This concept and ideas may sound very simple and trivial to winemakers, but I must say that some of the ideas that have arisen out of these online conferences have positively struck me. Many people were in attendance and followed our online conferences, and as I said, I was positively surprised. It was a kind of experiment, so we decided to go for digital conferences. They were all very successful. We managed to involve men and women who were basically far away, even in different continents, in South America, for instance, or in Europe. We had guests, we had technicians from France taking the floor, other friends from Latin America. So technology helped us a lot in this regard. So online conferences are very successful, and we had plenty of interesting and technical contents. The first one was dedicated to environmental sustainability, and we had university professors, we had technicians that are experts in very specific fields taking the floor. So we do expect the Slow Wine Trade Fair after the Vignon d'Oro to come up with specific documents that can remind us of all the topics we've been going through. As I said, the first web conference was about sustainability, and we lingered on some important aspects, like, first of all, the increase in the duration, in the lifetime of wines in general. So we would like to have vineyards that last longer, that have longer lives. We have fungus as a main issue. Most of you here in attendance today are winemakers, so you know that fungi in general are a big issue. So the research activities have to help us in this regard. Sustainability will certainly help us. We would like to have known invasive type of methods. Pruning has to be known invasive in order to save plants again from an otherwise certain death. fungicides. 80% of these chemical substances are used in the wine making industry in general, and we really have to make our best in order to make sure that the widespread use of these chemical agents is curtailed as much as possible. We also talked about so-called PWI, grapes, and we have also discussed the importance of funds in order to support research activities. Then another important aspect was the pivotal role of soil. We talked about climate change, soil erosion, and also the capability of the soil to preserve the presence of water, so we really have to take into consideration all that. And one of the last aspects we talked about was to reduce the water consumption in the production of wine, and this is really important. So we have to reduce the consumption of water as regards cleaning operations in the wineries, in the cellars as well, because much water has been wasted, so we have to make best use of the available water resources we rely on. Another aspect that tends to increase the waste of water in the fields is the number of treatments that are made in the vineyard. And the technicians that have taken the floor told us that when treatments are made in the vineyards, you lose out 95% of these chemical agents. So 95% of that just goes missing because they don't reach the leaves, basically, of the vines. So you lose, you waste water, you also waste chemical agents at the same time. So the idea is to halve the quantity of chemical substances that are currently sprayed onto vines in the vineyards is something that we want to achieve. So that's a goal that the European Union has set itself, the winemaking industry. So that's it as regards sustainability. So these were the first 5 items that we have identified as part of the first web conference. Then the second conference was about landscape, and we exchanged views with winemakers. Winemakers are the real stakeholders of rural development, of rural landscape. So winemakers play a pivotal role. They defend the integrity of the local landscape. Many of you here today are winemakers, so when you correctly interpret your role, when you live up to your role as custodians, as guardians of the landscape, then you can avoid the washout of the soil, you can avoid soil erosion. Think of the many fires that we have been witnessing in California and the south of Italy. So these are phenomena that tend to repeat over and over again, and they are destroying large areas. The idea is also to give priority to indigenous grapes, indigenous wine varieties, varieties that are able to adapt to climate change. And then another aspect was the role of winemakers standing in the front line in witnessing and in identifying climate change. And this also involves changes in the animals and in the insects living in and around vineyards. And there is a new range of insects and pathologies that are now present in the vineyards. Winemakers are then obliged to adapt their practices to a climate change that is becoming more and more extensive. The risk is that the overall winemaking conditions are worsened. Irrigation, for instance, is now been massively applied, but this is just a hasty solution to a bigger problem. Then I'm thinking about the large use of yeast in the wineries, when fermentation, for instance, does not take place, mainly because of climate-related reasons. So we have really been waiting eagerly for this conference. We have been talking a lot. We had been talking a lot about good and clean wine, which means sustainable wine, but we don't tend to talk too much about fair wine. So the social justice aspect always remains a bit opaque. So as part of this web conference, which was very interesting, we shed a light on the cooperation among wineries. Today we heard a lot about cooperation between associations and trade fair organizations, but cooperation schemes among wineries should also be supported, and this includes the training of the labor force and exchange of information at large. And we do hope that all the companies that are part of the Slow Wine Coalition will go for this. We would like to give up any form of exploitation and illegal practice in the field of the winemaking sector. And we were surprised by that, because we are not so much involved in the farming labor contracts. So 70% of the labor contracts signed by foreign workers entail some sort of opaque legal clauses. So that's something that has to be countered. The growth of the local territory can only take place if, again, local wineries are involved in the process. Our president, that is based in Chile, so the president of the Slow Food Local Chapter in Chile, told us more about these activities of opening up wineries to the wider public, and then investments are needed in order to support the value of local towns, local villages, and this is something that you as winemakers can, of course, support if you can. And then the idea is to support a business model that doesn't just involve making wine. It means cooperation, it means increasing the value of the local territory, it means producing other products, it means farming in general. So it means producing potatoes, it means producing other products that may have a lower marginality vis-a-vis wine, but it is only in this way that we will be able to create a virtuous relationship, and it is only in this way that we can support projects aimed at sustainability, social and cultural development. So it was very important for us to briefly summarize the main insights we derived from these 3 web conferences. As I said, Slow Wine Fair is not just a trade fair. Yeah, it will be a great opportunity for us to meet and to enter into new business contacts, but it's a good opportunity for us to stay close to our winemakers and to support them throughout this ecological transition period. Thank you.
Grazie Giancarlo.
Thank you, Giancarlo Gariglio. As you can see, there are many subjects we have to deal with, but that's just the beginning of what Slow Food wants to develop in the next few years. So get ready. Now, we should have had Mario Tozzi, geologist, one of the best communicators of scientific subjects, but unfortunately for health reasons, he can't be here to talk about the effect of climate change on winemaking and agriculture. Hopefully there'll be another opportunity to listen to him. But let's go to the last speaker of this plenary session. Agriculture is a dialogue between man and nature, nature and man. There are two elements to agriculture, therefore, and it's impossible to talk about one without the other. Now, if sustainable development in terms of the environment is all important, sustainable agriculture also is very important for man, and the ethical aspect of what people are doing, and of one of the key aspects of research is this idea of the ethical approach to work in agriculture, and not just the agricultural practice. Don Luigi Ciotti, in fact, in 1995 said, and he founded Libera, which was not only formed against organized crime. I'm very moved, in fact, because I don't usually get moved when speaking in public, but I am moved now. Don Luigi Ciotti founded Libera not only to form a coalition against the mafia, but also to enhance social justice and to push a means of production which not only produced good products, but also respected the social aspects of work. And as I say, I'm very, very moved because I, in fact, I'm somebody who has known Don Luigi Ciotti for many years. He helped, in fact, to form me. He was one of my teachers when I studied law. And he said, we cannot leave, said Don Ciotti, we cannot leave people just unto themselves. It's not just the justice system that must work towards combating the mafia. We have to fight all together. And he had this very wide vision. And also Carlo Petrini is the other speaker we're going to hear from today. And he will talk about the other aspect of agriculture, the dialogue that I mentioned before between man and agriculture. Carlo Petrini, who's founder, we all know, of 1906, when the year I was born, he developed Slow Food International, which is now present in all continents, and we have 10,000 projects in 160 countries, and he has for years been working to further this message throughout the world. I'd like to now give the floor and call upon Don Luigi Ciotti and Carlo Petrini.
Qui con noi, no?
No. Certo che se facciamo questo.
Certainly, if we make young girls be very moved, in fact, I mean, that's how are we going to be seen if that is the case, if we have this effect on young, beautiful girls? Shall I start? Okay, well, first of all, I'd like to greet you all. I come back to the Assembly of Wine Producers very willingly, and I'm very happy always to be here, because the experience that I have had has been that of enormous changes which have taken place in the way that we produce, we promote, and we enhance the value of wine. And today's meeting, in my view, is very, very important because you're all here today and you are the representatives of this new historic moment in which, yet again, wine production, which is the flower in the buttonhole of our agricultural world, you wine producers have a very, very important role. Let me explain things further. When I started this adventure at the beginning of the 1980s, wine production in Italy, but not only in Italy, other parts of the world, was very diversified. And that was why one of the first things that we developed with great conviction was to develop a wine guide where we gave indications on the quality level of the wine available. And with this sort of assessment, we were able to help many producers, especially small businesses, small producers who weren't known at all, to become, over time, the developers of very, very high-quality wine. That was the situation in the 1980s. And as I come from a wine producer in area, the Langhe in the Piedmont, I saw the generational change from the small-time wine producers who previously were just grape growers, and then they sold their grapes in bulk for the buyers then to make wine. I remember on Saturdays they produced wine. These small wine producers came to the market to sell these grapes. I apologize as a speaker, not wine, but grapes. And they would come and sell their grapes at this small marketplace. I still remember that. And the traders would come in, and the wine producers, in fact, came, and they were ready there at 8 o'clock in the morning. So, of course, they all arrived very early on and had left very early. But the traders came very much later and say, what's the price of grapes? And they would say, well, if it's too high, let's wait for a couple of hours. And of course, at that time, the grapes started to ferment, and nobody could think of going back to their farm with grapes which were unsold. And so the prices were determined by the traders, by the buyers. And in Piedmont, we say that these buyers of grapes would, in fact, then put their hands behind their bottom, and what they got in terms of the price. The grape growers just had to accept the price. And yet again, in agriculture, it's the growers that, in fact, have to accept the price. And even today, that's the case. The end of the line is always the farmer, the original farmer. And that happens even today. But in fact, this guide helped these small grape growers to become small wine producers. And I think we can say that the whole situation has profoundly changed compared to those years of the 1980s before the wine guide. But now we're in a completely different era. Today, it's much more difficult to make bad wine compared to a good wine. It's much more difficult to make bad wine. So this takes me back to the guide yet again. And our guide, our wine guide, has to give information and guide that can be of use to not so much assess, but to get to know wine. So assessment, if you like, is less important than it was before. It's a question of getting names out there and getting them known. And the new paradigm to be able to develop this new era of wine, the new parameter is the way that you produce in harmony with the environment and respecting your co-workers. That's the new paradigm. If we start thinking about it in this way, who are going to be the customers of the future? These will be a generation that today is out in the streets demanding policymakers to get a move on because they're going to be the victims of climate change in the future. And this young generation will no longer ask how many points or what the score of a wine is, but rather their questions will be how many chemical substances do you put on your grapes as they're growing, and are the workers in fact treated well? I see that you have many foreign seasonal workers. How are they treated? And I have many people, friends, who are wine producers, and they say, no, these foreign workers, in fact, are protected by cooperatives, and we pay the cooperative. That's a way of washing their hands of the workers, because it's the cooperatives that employ these workers that are the ones that are exploiting. And I say, you're not, in fact, out of the question, because you know full well that the cooperatives are exploiting these people, so you are co-responsible. You're also responsible. So you too have to follow these good practices and not just hide behind the cooperatives. And good practices, both from an economic point of view and a social point of view, involves a cost. But there is one thing. If you're in a certain area, I'm talking about my Langhe area, that can sell a bottle of wine at 50 euros. If people tell me that organic practices, in fact, cost too much, well, quite frankly, I refuse that and tell them to go to hell, because people who have these practices, organic practices, which are right, in fact entails a price which is not exaggerated, is not exorbitant. It is a certain cost which is added, but it's not that much. And also you have your conscience at rest, and also you will find the agreement of the young people who are now in the squares and the streets to protest against climate change not being the key to policy. And these were the people who will approve you in the future. I know that I've perhaps spoken too much, but I give the floor now to Don Luigi. We have lots of discussions together. But talking about the way in which the agricultural world has an influence on social justice and is so important in terms of social justice. And here again, Libera, the association Libera, has been dealing with this for many, many years. Another important thing, however, I'd like to leave you with. Why must wine be at the avant-garde? It always has been the avant-garde. If these virtuous practices start from the world of wine, they will cascade and trickle down to other agricultural areas. Wine is always being looked at with great attention by everybody. And one last thing, you should never forget, never, that your main activity and vocation is the plant, is the vine. That is your main concern. I see lots of young people who come and their main focus is marketing, which is very sexy and trendy to go around the world and sell their wines, but they never get into the vineyard. And I think that one of the distinctive signs and elements and characteristics of any producer of wine is to have a good relationship with the vineyard. And if they don't look at to the vineyard, but their workers do, but even if he doesn't work in the vineyard, he has to understand and know everything that is done on his vineyards and have a managerial role, because the day in which wine becomes just a commodity, well, it no longer becomes an agricultural project. And the moment when wine, in fact, leaves the agricultural sector to become a commodity to be sold, well, then it's no longer wine. It's no longer wine which we take as being a product from the land, and which characterizes that particular terroir, because you are the testimonials of the characteristics of your particular terroir, perhaps more than many politicians from various areas. The people who are stewards of the land carry the whole terroir and community in their wine, and you then become the distinctive characteristic of that particular territory or terroir. So you have a great responsibility. You have an enormous responsibility, and that will be of benefit to you in sales terms, certainly, but especially you have to have and be worthy of being the expression of your terroir. I've already taken up too much time, and now I give the floor to you.
Beh, volevo...
Right. I just wanted to wish myself and to wish all of us a conflict. So when a war knocks on our doors, and when we see so many generous people welcoming people that are suffering so much, well, when we talk about the current conflict, we should not neglect the other 33 wars that are currently in progress. So we are happy that we are welcoming so many people from a nearby country, but at the same time, as regards Italy and as regards Europe, we are not really welcoming in the same way all those who have a dark skin. And when we welcome people from abroad, we have to do that, no matter what color their skin has. But then there's another conflict that I wish we all had, but in our hearts, it's it's a conflict that has to take place here, because we are all sleepy to some extent. We are neglecting things. Things do not happen by chance. Think of what happened over the last 2 years. We were overwhelmed by the COVID-19 pandemic, but think of what happened over the last 2 years. Everybody was talking about peace, but that was an armed peace, a peace with weapons, because over the last 2 years, the public expenditure of governments for schools and for welfare had already gone downhill, and countries had already started buying new weapons. So there's another conflict that we need to take into consideration. That's the conflict of the different mafia strains. Mafia strains are getting better organized. They're powerful. They're present everywhere. We still see their traditional setups, but at the same time, they have done a leap forward in terms of quality. There's one disquieting aspect in all that, and this is that we have been considering more and more mafia as something normal, gambling, tree, and all these are just, again, becoming more and more normal, and they are investing in food and wine, in agriculture. Mafia has so much money that they buy entire restaurants, bars. Mafia strains are present everywhere. They are a scourge, and they operate within, again, the food and wine sector, as I said, in large markets. So that's a problem that affects everybody. We cannot accept that mafia is now considered as something being normal. This is one of the main problems. People say, no, it's not just one of the main problems in terms of crimes and criminal organizations. No, mafia strains are becoming stronger and stronger and present everywhere. And then this brings me back to COVID-19, the variant, which is the most dangerous one, and this has been well proven. So the most dangerous variant of the last 2 years is crime, basically, because criminals and offenders have large tools, have opportunities, have so much money they need to recycle somewhere, and again, money laundering is something that mafia does all the time. So please do not underestimate their presence, because they have these beautiful faces and they have been building companies, and we just need to get rid of this traditional image that we all have in our minds of the big mafia bosses. They are now managers. They're running companies. They can infiltrate different situations. And the other thing that I would like to share with you is my story. I do represent a community of people. So do not trust all those who go their own ways on their own, because you can only change things if you do things together as a community, if you pool energies together, just as you did when you started off with Archigolo. We should not forget that. What a nice initiative. And then Slow Food, Terra Madre, and many other initiatives. And you did that as a choral activity, doing things together. So we have to share things with those who come last, and with the poor people. And then this brings me to Libera, which is an initiative that was born out of big disgrace of Capaci. And Libera means freedom for movement for citizens. Libera is an association that is present everywhere throughout Europe, in Latin America. You can find Libera in Africa. So there's a profound need to fight against all the different mafia strains, all the different expressions of violence, because that's violence. Let's face it. And violence is something that is present throughout our country. So when our association was set up, one of the main ideas was to gather around 1 million signatures to take away assets from mafia bosses and corrupt people. And corrupt people were taken away from that bill of law. And that was very clear to me, because there are so many corrupt people within the political world. Having said that, those million signatures that were gathered in order to make sure that such exclusive assets could be taken away from mafia bosses and they could just be given back to the society, so that all these assets could be used by the society at large. So that was the meaning of our activity back then. And these assets must now be used in order to provide a service to people. These assets have to be given back to communities, because mafia strains have stolen these assets from the local community. They have been shedding blood, they have been killing people, they have been making a lot of people poorer because of their criminal activities. So we've been fighting fiercely. We've been gathering millions of signatures, and this rule of law, and this bill of law was then passed. But it still needs to be improved, because mafia bosses just love setting up wineries and farms, but they don't love the soil. Those who do that, they just don't love the soil, they don't love agriculture, they just want to show off. So we have really been fighting in order to set up agricultural cooperatives based on public tender, by making best use of the assets that had been seized and confiscated from mafia bosses. So we have set up cooperatives in order to provide freedom and work and dignity to people. And I think this is just great. So it's just great that we now have a fairly large number of cooperatives that were set up on the ashes, so to speak, of the assets that have been seized from mafia bosses. So dignity has been given back to many young people. A lot of masters have been helping us in terms of organic wine. Good, clean, and fair. This is something we have always been fighting for, and this is the epitome of the manifesto that you also hold very dear. Giuseppe Bevichiato and Berice Coronesi, the winery Cento Passi, so the production of those wines. Let's think about it, and then think of what we did in Torcaloro, in Mesalia, in the Apuli region, and in many other portions of Italy. It's a wonder. So these are assets that have been seized from mafia bosses and that are now being given back to the local community, and the local community is producing good, clean, and fair products. And tasty products as well. Well, mind you, if I know that many of you are producing extraordinary wines, but I must tell you, and you know that because you have first-hand experience, have one vitamin more than your wines. And that vitamin is just the vitamin of the rule of law, the vitamin of justice going hand in hand. Unfortunately, we are witnessing a large spread of illegal practices and gangmasters within the agricultural field. So gangmasters are widespread throughout all the industrial sectors, and this applies to the agricultural world as well, to rural areas as well. So we should not forget, again, slavery, because this is a form of slavery. No matter how committed we are to change things, this is still a fact. So we're here today to celebrate the positive things that we are experiencing, that we are achieving thanks to your work, because you put a lot of love and passion in what you're doing. But at the same time, there are still a lot of situations where we are still experiencing slavery. Gangmasters, and illegal labor practices in the agricultural field are still a fact. So all the checks that have been activated are not enough to identify such illegal practices. So that's a scourge. And many fragile laborers are migrants, and they just accept everything. They just bend because this allows them to stay, to have a stay permit. So basically, the law in our country is not right, and many people are just forced to accept everything to make their ends meet, and in order to be able to stay in our country. So there again, we have to fight on in order to conquer dignity for these people. And now let me conclude by mentioning Pope Francis and his words. His father started from Porto Comaro, from the area around Asti, from a local territory where vineyards were present everywhere, and his grandfathers had already booked a ticket on a ship to go to Argentina, but then they didn't make it, and they didn't travel to Argentina, and that ship ticket that they had bought that wasn't used, so they decided to travel later on to Argentina. So they were loving their soil, their vineyards, but they could not make their ends meet. So a turning point was needed. So as I said, they decided to take ship to Argentina later on. So if Pope Francis were here today, he would tell you that that sheep going all the way to Argentina, the one that his grandfathers should have taken to go to Argentina, then sunk, along with hundreds of other Italians who drowned in the ocean. So that's the story of today, and that's the story of many other people before us. So, and I will travel to Argentina next Sunday, because Argentina has asked a helping hand. They want to seize assets from the strong, powerful mafia bosses, and they would also like to have these assets given back to the local communities. And Pope Francis reminds us of how important it is for us as Christians not to neglect this problem. So every form of exploitation is a form of sin, and we cannot be accomplice of this situations. Slavery is present, is still present, so it is upon us to monitor such situations, to enhance the value of those good things that we are managing to do, and to keep wide open eyes Like owls, we have to keep our eyes open. Just use the owl as a symbol in your brands. In the past, they used to use night birds, birds that sing in the night and then can see through the darkness. So wide eyes. We have been going through darkness, through dark periods of time. Now we're looking for light at the end of this tunnel. So we, just like owls, we sing and we see these slivers of light during the night. So we wish you all the best. We wish you a successful recovery after the pandemic. And I just hope that you will all stay negative, meaning that we will not be infected by COVID-19, so immune from COVID, but not immune from your responsibilities. Well, what I see right now are the minutes that we still have. Okay, I will try and make best use of the remaining minutes. I'm really glad to be here today, sitting next to Luigi. At the very beginning of our journey, so at the very beginning, as I said, of our common journey, we established the first contacts with slow food at Salone del Gusto, and I remember that there again we got to know each other, and Libera la Terra is now present almost everywhere. So and And again, Libera la Terra is at the forefront in this regard, also in terms of winemaking technologies. So I'm really glad, because good environmental practices are now being acknowledged, or more widely acknowledged than they were in the past. And this goes hand in hand with taste and other sensorial experiences. When I started this journey, as I said, there were big differences between one winemaker and the other, and the aspects of quality were, again, an heritage of the past. It was our old way of understanding wine that was playing the lion's share. So I knew Barolo very well, and I remember the old guys telling me, taste this Barolo, and it tastes like Marsala, and this was considered to be something positive, that a Barolo wine had the same taste or the same nuance of a Marsala. And then some others would tell me that Barolo had a disgusting taste. So the old production technique, the casks that were used back then, the pouring techniques, oxidization. So basically, Marsala was a nuance that you could pick when you tasted Barolo. But the old people had full respect of all those those old technologies. So all these defects were there, and they appreciated them. Now I would like to stress that this transition to organic wine has changed all the organoleptic parameters and standards. But the first organic wines, if I correctly remember. And I was part of a jury that was tasting organic wines back then, many years ago. And to be honest, I didn't like them. At a certain given point in time, I said, well, I do appreciate your efforts, but the taste is not, but it doesn't really taste nice. That's what I had to say. So that period of time has gone. Now things have changed. Now organic wines are absolutely brilliant. They're called natural wines. And although there are some very special features to these wines. Now, the special features are considered to be positive, so we have just moved away from very similar products, and diversity is now considered as a distinctive element. So I would like to congratulate you upon this evolution. Mr. Gariglio, I hope I'm talking here to people who are sensitive to these ideas. Otherwise, you are just asked me to preach things that people will not understand. So what I wanted to say is, don't worry if the organoleptic characteristics of your wines are not the ones that you would always expect from wine. So biodiversity is considered to be added value. And if this biodiversity comes from three elements, being the local territory, the local wine variety, second, the known invasive use of chemical agents, and third element, the awareness that this diversity is a new and favorable aspect because it's distinctive. So it sets you aside from others. And luckily enough, new generations are on it, are working on these aspects. I can see that in my own university. University students are attending today, and I think they should have attended this conference as well, because they should hear things, the things that we have been saying. I'm sure they will all be taking part in the tasting sessions. Well, they have already come. They were already here yesterday evening, so they should have come to and attend this conference as well. So we are at the turning point, an epoch-making change in terms of organoleptic tasting experience, and this facilitates your work and initiatives like Libera and this new company set up by young winemakers are being facilitated in their work. So it's easy, of course, to produce successful wines if you have a well-known brand. But if you have to start from scratch on a territory that has been seized by local authorities and that used to belong to mafia strains, then it's much more difficult. So I really think that this new world is a world that is based on transformation, and I'm honest. So I think that we are embracing a new period of time. It may last several years, it may last 1 century, and it's called ecological transition. And there, as part of this ecological transition, I'm sure that we will be witnessing a change of paradigm. We will be more in tune with nature. That's what I wish. This ecological transition, this green transition, is considered by somebody as something negative. And our Minister for Ecological Transition also said something quite unfortunate. Well, hard times are looming on the horizon, he said. After several years, no, that's not true. The world cannot be changed if you're if you're sad, if you're crying. So you have to embrace this change with joy, because it's a process of freedom. We're getting rid of chemical substances. We're getting rid of exploitation. You will have more freedom to come up with wine varieties that you like first. So it's a process. It's a process. It's a process that aims at freedom. You free yourselves, and you have to go through this process with joy, with happiness. And again, we are not entering into a period where we necessarily need to be sad. We are about to free ourselves. This would have to be one of the distinctive aspects. So listen to your taste, to what your palate tells you, and then you will see that you will also be able to best explain your wines to others. And don't always look for the best scores. I started off with scores, but to be honest, I don't think that we should go for scores all the time. I think it is more important to enter into a dialogue with your consumers. You need to come up with innovative wines. Maybe I'm just, yeah. Maybe just add one more thing, if I may. I would really like to wish you all the best for your activity and for your work. Your work is a form of art, and my wish, I'm just a small thing, I'm just represent a community, so what I wish you is that ethics and aesthetics can always go hand in hand, so the good and the good taste can go hand in hand. That's my wish.
Grazie, grazie mille.
Thank you very much, Carlo Petrini and Don Luigi Ciotti. There's no better way to conclude this plenary. But we haven't finished. I see you all standing up. I'd just like to say that I don't get moved very often speaking in public. And I thought, well, perhaps plenary is practically over and I've done it. But I have to say that I'm very happy that I did, in fact, get very agitated and very moved before the last two speakers. I willingly admit it. It was, I felt very, very small before these giants, spiritual and moral giants. So thank you once again. As I see you're all standing up. I'm sorry, this is out of mic. I'm sorry. What Mr. Petrini is saying, I can't hear. Let me come to the conclusions, however, very quickly. This is the time for thanks to various people. Sana, the fair organized by BolognaFiere, with Slow Foods Artistic Management, with FederBio and Arc of Bologna, the support of the Italian Foreign Ministry, and the sponsorship of Emilia Romagna authorities. Also, Slow Wine Fair has to thank many people. We would like to thank STDP, Basta, UniCredit, the bank, leasing partner, Milano Wine Peak, Vendegno Botanico, current partners, Pomiori Rocco, Pultex, San Bernardo, Trist, and Zorzi. We'd like to thank you all very much. Just one note. To go to the tasting, once go down the elevator, and you should in fact have a coupon for the lunch. So have a great slow wine fair.